I have never seen what I just watched in the White House at a meeting between Donald Trump, JD Vance, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. I mean, this is wild. So I want to do a couple things. One, I want to just go through it, what happened, in case you missed it. And then two, I want to give you 4 takeaways or thoughts from it. Okay. All right. So let's go through what happened. So Zelensky obviously was here in Washington because the U.S. is trying to negotiate a deal with Ukraine to get to get their rare earth minerals, which we want, in exchange for continued support militarily in their war against Russia. They met in private, Zelensky, Vance, and Trump. And then they had what's called a pool spray. This is effectively normally just kind of it's not a big deal usually. It's usually the leaders saying like, things are good. We had a good talk. We're going to continue to work on things, blah, blah, blah. And there's like a handful of reporters there to document it. Okay. That is not what happened. Okay. So it's about 50 minutes long, the whole thing. And really it's just at the end where things get really dicey. And I watched it frame by frame, did a forensic analysis of it. I watched it frame by frame because I wanted to see how the began. Okay. So JD Vance, mostly Trump and Zelensky are talking and they're taking questions. And then Vance, who is there, at one point says, "Can I say something, Mr. President?" And Trump says, sure. And what Vance says, and again, I'm paraphrasing, but what Vance says is like, this is a different approach than what we saw with Joe Biden to Ukraine and Russia. That Biden talked a big game, but didn't do much of anything. And under Biden's watch, Putin invaded Ukraine. And that what the Trump-Vance White House is doing is saying diplomacy matters. We are going to get in a room with everyone and we're going to talk about it. Okay, so so Vance kind of begins that. Now, Zelensky is clearly annoyed at this. So Zelensky comes back and says effectively, we tried diplomacy with Putin. Germany, the UK signed a deal, and Ukraine signed a deal in 2019 that said he would not invade again. And he broke that. So what has diplomacy done us effectively? And then it is on, right? So then Vance is like, you know what? I think you're being disrespectful. I think you're using the American media to try to make a point. You don't say thank you enough for what we did. And then Trump gets in on it. Trump clearly also annoyed. Trump gets in on it and says, you don't hold any cards. You're trying to talk tough, but you can't do anything. You're in a bad negotiating position. I mean, it goes absolutely sideways. And again, just to repeat, and not to exaggerate, but to repeat, I have never seen something like this happen in diplomatic circles. Sure, sometimes the staff fight behind the scenes, and maybe even the principals fight behind the scenes. But seeing the principals, the president and vice president of the United States and the president of Ukraine going at it, arguing in public, is not something I ever thought I would see. I mean, it is a remarkable thing. So what's the immediate fallout? The immediate fallout is they were supposed to have a press conference, Zelensky and Trump. That's canceled. Zelensky is headed out. Trump took to Truth Social, as he often does, to say this, quote, "We had a very meaningful meeting in the White House today. Much was learned that could never be understood without conversation under such fire and pressure. It's amazing what comes out through emotion, and I have determined that President Zelensky is not ready for peace if America is involved, because he feels our involvement gives him a big advantage in negotiations. I don't want advantage, I want peace. He disrespected the United States of America in its cherished Oval Office. He can come back when he is ready for peace." All right. I have 4 takeaways. 4 big thoughts. Before I get to that, I want to remind you, if you don't subscribe to this channel, now is the time. In the moment, independent analysis. And what I mean by independent, I'm calling balls and strikes no matter what uniform the batter at the plate is wearing. That's what I do. I think it's more important now than ever, and I need you to subscribe. Okay, I said I had 4 takeaways. I've got them right here. Okay, takeaway number 1. And I've said this before, but I'm saying it again because it's that important. I wrote down, I have never seen anything like this before, ever. I really haven't. Not even in the first Trump term did we see this sort of muscular diplomacy, emotion diplomacy. Like we are in uncharted territory here when we're talking about the presidential level, the president of Ukraine, the president and vice president of the United States fighting publicly about what to do with an ongoing conflict in Russia and Ukraine. Thought / takeaway number 2. What you think of that confrontation depends almost entirely on what you think of Donald Trump. So I was monitoring social media right afterward, and the reaction is almost entirely dependent on your opinion of Trump. If you like Donald Trump, you are going to say, that's exactly what we need to do. We need to stand up for ourselves. Like, we're the boss in this. We are the big player in this market. Like, Ukraine needs us much more than we need them. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. But why would we allow them to lecture us in public? That's ridiculous. That's how things have gone in the past. I voted for Trump because I want muscular foreign policy and diplomacy and toughness, and that's what he showed. I'll note the White House quickly turned out that clip of the back and forth, the exchange, and sent it out to everyone. They clearly think it was a good thing. I also, on the other end, people saying this is the most embarrassing moment ever for the United States. This is not how we treat our allies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We promised that we would support Ukraine, that argument. Again, those are people who don't like Donald Trump. So the view is going to be almost entirely based on what you think of Donald Trump. You're not going to get, there's not going to be a lot of people who love Donald Trump and hated this back and forth in the White House. There's not a lot of people who hate Donald Trump and love this back and forth in the White House, if that makes sense. Takeaway number 3. Volodymyr Zelensky let his emotions get the better of him. So I understand why Volodymyr Zelensky was frustrated in a lot of that press briefing, pool spray, whatever you want to call it, because Trump was outlining, sort of like, we don't get enough, we've given too much, we need to get more, we need a deal, et cetera, et cetera. Here's the problem. Zelensky does not hold a lot of the cards here. You cannot, when you are in that negotiating position, allow your emotions to get the better of you. I say this all the time about politicians. The worst thing you can do as a politician is be angry in public, or because you're going to say and do things that are not conducive to getting you where you want to go, I guess is what I would say. And that felt to me, as I was watching it, what Zelensky was doing. I know there's going to be people who say it's a moral point. That's all that matters. Well, what matters is the realpolitik, which is my takeaway number 4. Here is the reality of the situation. Ukraine, I said this before, I'm going to repeat it. Ukraine needs us much more than we need Ukraine. If Ukraine wants to continue this war in Russia, they need U.S. financial and military support, period. Europe is not in a place where they're going to be able to ramp that up very quickly financially or militarily, okay? At a level that would sustain Ukraine in a fight against a massive superpower like Russia. That's point 1. If Zelensky wants an end to the conflict, and he may well, he has to ensure and do everything he can to ensure he and Ukraine have a seat at that table, that it's not Russia and the United States talking and carving things up and then bringing it to Ukraine and saying, here's the deal. He needs to ensure he has a role in that. Given those realities, whatever you think of sort of the morality of all this, the reality of it is the U.S. holds a lot of cards, Russia holds a few cards, Ukraine doesn't hold many cards, and they badly need the United States on their side. Given that, I think what Zelensky did in losing his temper and getting frustrated and, going back and forth with Vance and Trump, it does not serve him or Ukraine well. I don't know if it was strategic or not. I'm guessing it wasn't. I think he just got frustrated and was annoyed and disagreed with what they were saying. And I get it. But I always remind people, everybody's got to serve somebody, right? When my boss back in the days would tell me to do something I disagreed with, if it wasn't, if he said, go murder someone, obviously I'd be like, no, I'm not doing that. But if it was like, if they were like, hey, we want you to write about this, and I didn't think that was the right angle or whatever, I did it mostly because I wanted to keep my job. This whole, I'm quitting on moral grounds. Most people can't do that, right? And I think Zelensky's in a situation where he needs the U.S. badly. And he has now made it more difficult for that to happen. I don't really know what Trump means. Like, he can come back when he wants peace. What does that mean? My guess is Trump wants Zelensky to grovel to him. Look, Trump is very very interested in power and the appearance of power. So my guess is he kind of wants Zelensky to grovel now, that Zelensky embarrassed the office, really maybe embarrassed Trump, and that Trump is going to exact a penalty for that. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I can tell you Zelensky has not helped Ukraine's overall chances of conducting this war with Russia or ending this war in a way that helps Ukraine and gets Ukraine a fair shake by what he did in the White House on Friday. And again, we can debate the moral rectitude or righteousness of what he did, but in terms of realpolitik, my fourth takeaway, in terms of realpolitik, I think that was a mistake, what we saw from Zelensky. Let me say a couple things. One, as I said earlier in the video, please subscribe if you haven't. I need your support. We are over 60,000. We are surging forward, but I need your support for independent analysis without fear or favor. No corporate bosses, no billionaires, just me telling you how it is. Sometimes it's going to be what you want to hear. Sometimes it's going to be what you don't want to hear, but it will always come from an honest, transparent, and independent place. So that's number one. Number two, like this video if you can. Do it for the algorithm. Number three, comment. Again, the algorithm rewards engagement. So if you have a thought, share your thought. And finally, I need you to tell your friends about this. I need you to spread the word organically. I like Chris Cillizza. I don't always agree with him. You shouldn't always agree with me. I don't always agree with him, but I like where he comes from. I feel like it's an honest, authentic place. So spread that word, and everybody do take care.